I'm back here 3 years since I came last, where I think many of you, like my friends from our batch, colluded and brought me here for the FMRC conference to talk on universal healthcare. It's so comforting to be back in the lap of your mother, and this is my alma mater. I've learned a lot from here and also from the army, and I think nothing would be complete without this journey. So just bear with me for the next 15-20 minutes. I don't claim that whatever I'm going to tell you, I've done it alone, because a lot of my friends, and I call them mad friends because they make a difference, they have been listening to their inner conscience and working with me. I think the highest paid in my organization today is about 30,000 rupees a month, which probably is lesser than what a soldier in the army gets. But yes, also a rider that, from Rudolf Virchow and down to Hasan Mahler, who talked about in the year 2000 when we missed the bus for Health for All, that health is politics. Whether we like to talk about it or keep mum about it, that itself is a political statement, and I stand by it. So if I transgress the TED Talk thing that I hint something political about it, don't mind. Next. But I just finished AFMC and then joined Army Hospital. After a great tenure in Army Hospital where we saw the latest gadgets, we were thrown out to Arunachal Pradesh, where I think the Himalayas played a lot on my mind. I started asking myself, what am I doing? Thanks to the army, I had never been to a village earlier. Thanks to the army, I started seeing villages where I had never seen earlier because of my urban background. But there, when I was moving around in Arunachal and I realized what's happening, that the life that I was leading was probably so sheltered that I found myself very inadequate. I used to walk a lot. I challenged myself to be with the infantry, and I used to walk faster than them, quicker than them, and higher than them most of the time. And I used to land up in places where there was, forget about education, forget about medicine, there was not even clothing on people. There were places where people had not even tasted sugar till that time. And all that got me thinking, and I pledged to myself, yes, and I was bickering to many of my friends, to Shubroto, my classmate, he said, bloody hell, namak khata hai army ka aur phir chilate ho aur desh ka namak khate ho aur bolte ho. And it hurt me a lot because I had joined the army in a very patriotic spirit, probably because my father was a freedom fighter. But meanwhile, I discovered some health work in Rajasthan. My whole idea of working in villages was probably that I'll teach some children, I'll probably treat some patients, and then when I was in Arunachal and later on in Rajasthan, people would get you a murga to eat, or sometimes even a girl to get married to because you've been nice to them. So I thought, zindagi kat jayegi. But I never thought that you could do things on a larger scale, on a more public health kind of platform. So when I found this organization in Rajasthan and I met a friend who was a brilliant friend, and he and I decided then to move to the Northeast. So while doing all this, I shifted with some of these professional friends to the Northeast, and we started some work in Majuli, which is the largest inhabited river island in the world. And typically, because we were a group of professionals, I took on the health work, typically health, started working with community health workers, trained them with a box of medicines, generic medicines, and so that they could deliver health care and treat most of the common illnesses that you could think of in less than 10 rupees. And we proved it. But in just 1 year, because we were reaching out to areas which got cut off from the floods, the first, we had tried to go into those areas, we didn't realize that that's where the militants used to hide. And they started seeing a pattern to it, and they thought that we are probably raw agents, raw as in research and analysis wing, and probably were after them. And they kidnapped my senior colleague, and as ransom, we were asked to quit the place, not just the island, but the entire Northeast, and televise it so that they could see it. We went out and we learned later on that this person had already been killed, and they were fooling us. So some of us dared to come back. We decided that we are not going to bow down to violence, especially because some of us had taken a vow to non-violence, and we felt that if we were to run away from this place just because of these people's work, we will be actually succumbing to violence. So some of us came back and 2 of us started this journey in the end. I pretty much did the same thing here as I was doing earlier in Rajasthan or in Majuli. But one thing which I was doing there, which I learned from Rajasthan initially, was my TB work. When I instituted one of the later short course chemotherapy treatments there, but without the dots, the directly observed treatment, we of course got about 85% cure rates in it, self-administered. But what we realized was, though we were curing a lot of patients, the same villages continued to send newer and newer patients every year. But those villages in which we had started some weaving program or an income generation program or any program which would drought-proof the economy, the newer patients had stopped coming. And that's where I think this convergence started working on my mind. Whatever little we did, I was making headlines at that time with both the malaria department and the TB department. Not because I was doing something great, but I was just doing something more than ordinary, trying to go deeper and deeper into why something was happening. And even from there, we brought out very good quality papers at one time on maybe the Stephens eye bleeding inside the indoor water tanks of Rajasthan. The mosquito which was there, which was otherwise nobody knew why the malaria had spread out there. Or whether it was on TB, where we had already discovered 10% of MDR TB even back there in 94, 95. So I learned from that and started work in Assam again, but this time in Bodoland, which was still in the throes of militancy. This was the year 2000, and when we started there, I simply picked up what I had learned there, and I said, instead of starting a TB treatment, by that time the government had already come up with the DOTS program, was giving medicine. I said, let me not concentrate on that, but let's learn from it. Let's choose the poorest of the families, and because many of them already in the Northeast knew how to weave, we said, can we make this into an income generation program? Also because the fact that many of these areas had, one more, next. Yeah. Go ahead. So here also I was doing the same thing, but what we realized initially was that while we were reaching out, because there was no health service at all, between these 50 barefoot doctors that we had trained, who would give you antibiotics, and we had protocols worked out, we used to have systems of managing them. We realized that what we missed out there, and we were losing around 300 to 400 patients of malaria every year on malaria, but yes, they were never diagnosed as malaria because there was nothing to prove it. So we also set up barefoot community laboratory with again semi-literate people, and they would be charging 10 to 15 rupees for a malaria slide. But we had to be sure that what they were doing was correct, and I sent about 100 randomly selected slides. I sent it to National Institute of Malaria Research. And I said, can you please check out whether what they are doing is correct. 10 days later, they had flown down to see what was a training program like, because this was the first time that they had found 94% species identification being correct. If anyone of you remembers how you see things in a microscope, I remember very well that when our teacher would say, oh, look at that, at 3 o'clock position, and I couldn't see it, but if the person before me said, yes ma'am, I can see it very well, I had no heart to say that I can't see it. But what we used was technology. We used LCD projectors, we used this thing, and if anybody said, well, this is a PV, we would ask him to get up and say, why is it a PV? Point out what are the characteristics, and only then was he very sure. These people, within no time, had got very, very talented. But then 2005, we had the National Rural Health Mission coming up, and we started reducing our parallel systems. We refused them to create more health workers. And some of these are still, they're working, some of them are working as ASHAs, but our belief that a community health worker gets a very good opportunity to enter a society through ill health, but we feel that she connects you to all the determinants of health, and there are agencies which are required to look into the determinants of health which are slightly outside the realm of the Health and Family Welfare Department. We started talking about the right to food. The Supreme Court had passed judgments on how many Anganwadis have to be there, how much of rations people are supposed to get. all that was missing from there, with the result that we raised our voice, we raised the consciousness of people, made a bit of a halla without doing any violence. I mean, because that's one of our focuses, that we can't allow violence. And very soon, we were contributing to the National Food Security Act, which has come out today. And we are very happy that things have moved constitutionally, things have moved, managerially, so that somewhere from the top, people are now watching. Otherwise, the Supreme Court had appointed me as the advisor on right to food for Assam. But that's not the way. I think the whole system has to do it. I couldn't be possibly going to every single nook and corner of Assam and keep reporting back to the Supreme Court whether somebody is given rations or not. We also want to prevent violence. And I think here, the people who are from preventive and social medicine, or some of you are going to be studying it later on further, we always talk about primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. Recently, people have started talking about primordial prevention, but I think even primordial prevention is not being properly understood. I think we are talking about primordial prevention where we talk about moving away from the animal instincts of humans. I see that most of our problems are not just because there's not enough money or there's not enough outreach. A lot of the problems are because there's corruption there. There's a lot of greed in us. There's a lot of lack of care for the other which is around. And I think a lot of us need to look at that, look at those kind of people to converge for our public health, because I think those are going to be the dangers of the future. Violence is coming back into a lot of things. I mean, if you read the papers, whether it's a journalist being killed, or whether it's a woman being beaten at home, or a child who's beaten by the father or the mother. Mind you, these are actually criminal acts, because even a father or a mother are not supposed to touch a child in the house. This is a criminal act. But we allow it because that's what we have seen. You may not allow this in UK or in US or anywhere else, but in India we just do it with impunity. And because children are exposed to violence at a very young age at their homes, you have children growing up understanding that any solution to any problem is violence. And I think there, if we need to move ahead, we need to make people understand how to solve a problem with a good dialogue. And that's where we are working these days. 2012 shook us because we had an outbreak of violence, communal violence in our area, which we had not really foreseen. And from that day, we've started a journey with initiatives of change here in Panchgani. And through them, I was very happy that 3 months ago, I brought the militant commander and the students' union leader both to Panchgani. And I saw it so beautiful when they pledged their tenets of initiatives of change, which is absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. When they pledged that, I felt that my journey in Assam is no longer required, because I think that's where I think I should have moved, and that's what I always thought, that we, by our long-term work, would be able to influence bringing back peace and reducing these communal divides which have plagued the Northeast for a long time. Just like the malaria engineers did at one time, we never thought of them as public health workers. But today I think we need philosophers, religious leaders, all of them to be seen as public health specialists for us, so that we prevent wars, we prevent communal strifes, we prevent civil wars which are now plaguing everywhere. Remember this, that whenever we as doctors or as health people we talk of, we look at mortality and morbidity as disease or the end of disease. And anything which causes death and disease is our domain. So if it's a war, if it's a communal killing, if it's a beef killing, if it's any killing, I think we need to wake certain sections of society up, to wake them up and say, dialogue is the way forward, it's not about violence. And I think that's where I'll end. We call ourselves the ant because we believe that ants clean up the muck that others keep throwing at us. That size doesn't matter for us. Others think we are small, but an ant goes up and lifts between 20 to 80 times its own weight. And the ants never give up, and that's where I am. Thank you so much.